Maria Bennett entered the Department of Community Planning, ready to make a difference, but faced relentless exclusion and dismissal as a diversity hire. Publicly humiliated by her supervisor despite her flawless work, Maria knew she wasn't just fighting bias, but a broken system. What she did next would shake her workplace to its core. But let's start from the beginning. Maria Bennett stepped into the Department of Community Planning with a mix of excitement and determination. Dressed in a sharp navy blazer, her polished shoes clicking against the marble floor, she radiated professionalism. The modern government building, all glass and steel, buzzed with energy as employees hurried past. Clutching her neatly prepared portfolio, Maria was ready to tackle her first day and make her mark in a field she was passionate about. As she approached the reception desk, she noticed the receptionist's polite but brief acknowledgement. "New hire?" the woman asked, glancing at her ID badge. Maria smiled warmly and confirmed, introducing herself. The receptionist nodded, handing her a visitor pass, before returning to her work without further engagement. Maria's first team meeting was scheduled within an hour. She walked into the conference room, where small clusters of colleagues chatted easily. She introduced herself confidently, but as she spoke, she couldn't help but notice the quick glances exchanged between some of the team members. Their polite smiles didn't reach their eyes. Maria brushed off the unease, focusing on her enthusiasm for contributing to meaningful urban development projects. When the meeting began, Maria presented her idea, a fresh initiative aimed at revitalizing underfunded neighborhoods through equitable resource allocation and community engagement. She detailed her proposal with clear statistics, actionable steps, and a vision for impact. When she finished, the room was quiet. No questions, no nods of encouragement. It felt like her words had evaporated into the air. Moments later, a white colleague chimed in, paraphrasing Maria's key points as if they were his own. "What a brilliant approach," another team member praised, completely ignoring Maria. She sat frozen, a mix of disbelief and frustration bubbling inside her. Though disheartened, Maria refused to let the slight defeat her. Hard work will prove them wrong, she thought. Over the next days, subtle slights began to accumulate. Missing her name from email threads, colleagues talking over her during discussions. Each exclusion stung, but Maria pressed forward, determined to show her worth, despite the barriers silently building around her. The tension boiled over during a crowded departmental meeting on a Wednesday morning. Maria sat at the long oak table, her meticulously prepared presentation laid out before her. When it was her turn to speak, she confidently shared her findings, using clear data to support her conclusions about funding disparities in underserved communities. She'd worked late nights to ensure her numbers were accurate, her arguments airtight. Yet, as she finished, the room was silent. Mr. Whitley, her supervisor, leaned back in his chair, his expression cold and condescending. "Maria," he began, his voice carrying the weight of dismissal. "These figures don't seem to align with the goals of our department. It's clear you need to revisit your methodology." His words were sharp, deliberate. Maria opened her mouth to defend her work, but Mr. Whitley had already moved on to the next agenda item, his tone suggesting the discussion was closed. Humiliated, Maria could feel her face flush as colleagues avoided her gaze. She clenched her hands under the table, determined not to let her disappointment show. Later, in the break room, she overheard two colleagues whispering near the coffee machine. "Did you hear Whitley shut her down? She really thought she'd make an impact," one said, laughing softly. "Well, what do you expect?" the other replied. "She's just a diversity hire. It's all for show." Maria froze, her heart sinking. The words stung, a confirmation of the unspoken barriers she faced daily. Fighting back tears, she left the room. That night, sitting at her kitchen table, Maria stared at her untouched plate of food. She picked up her phone and called her mother, the one person who always knew what to say. "Baby," her mother said gently after hearing the story, "you've fought through worse. They might underestimate you, but you come from a line of women who break barriers. Don't let them see you fold." Her mother's words, warm yet firm, reignited Maria's spirit. She wasn't just working for herself. She was fighting for the communities her work could uplift. Determined, Maria decided she would persevere, not to prove her doubters wrong, but to fulfill her own purpose. The glow of Maria's desk lamp became a familiar sight in her apartment as she spent late nights working tirelessly on her proposal. The topic was complex, addressing the disparities in urban development funding and proposing actionable solutions. Maria pored over spreadsheets, research papers, and community feedback, determined to craft a flawless plan. Every word, every data point was chosen carefully to ensure her proposal was not just thorough, but unassailable. At the same time, Maria kept a private record of the workplace biases she experienced. She documented moments when her suggestions were dismissed, emails where she was inexplicably excluded, and key meetings where she was overlooked. It wasn't just about venting frustration. She was preparing a factual account of her struggles, should the need arise. Her opportunity came unexpectedly. A high-profile urban renewal project, led by a favored colleague, began to fall apart. The mismanagement was glaring: missed deadlines, ballooning costs, and community backlash. The department buzzed with quiet panic. Maria saw her chance. She polished her proposal further and requested an emergency presentation to senior management. When the day came, Maria entered the boardroom with quiet determination. Her presentation was sharp, blending compelling data with actionable strategies. As she spoke, she highlighted the gaps in the current project's planning and execution, offering her solutions as the way forward. The room, initially skeptical, began to shift. Senior managers nodded in reluctant admiration, realizing the depth of her expertise. Then, predictably, Mr. Whitley interrupted. "Maria, while your enthusiasm is commendable, your points seem overly idealistic. Perhaps you don't fully understand the complexities involved." Maria, ready for this moment, calmly presented undeniable evidence: charts, feedback from community leaders, and financial forecasts. "With respect, Mr. Whitley, the numbers and community feedback speak for themselves," she said firmly, her voice unwavering. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to the department director. After a moment, he spoke. "Maria, your analysis is exceptional. I'd like you to lead the next phase of this project." Maria's heart swelled with triumph, but she remained composed. This wasn't just a victory for her. It was a step toward dismantling the biases that had held her back. Maria approached the project with precision and vision, determined to prove not just her own capabilities, but the potential for equitable leadership. Under her guidance, the faltering initiative began to take shape. She prioritized clear communication, accountability, and inclusion, bringing previously sidelined team members into the fold. By fostering collaboration and drawing on the strengths of the entire team, Maria steered the project back on track. Her efforts led to tangible success: revitalized neighborhoods, satisfied stakeholders, and praise from community leaders. The transformation did not go unnoticed. Colleagues who had once dismissed her now sought her input, and senior management began to recognize her as an invaluable asset. But for Maria, success in the project was only part of the battle. She saw the systemic issues within the workplace that needed to change and decided to act. Maria approached the project with precision and vision, determined to prove not just her own capabilities, but the potential for equitable leadership. Under her guidance, the faltering initiative began to take shape. She prioritized clear communication, accountability, and inclusion, bringing previously sidelined team members into the fold. By fostering collaboration and drawing on the strengths of the entire team, Maria steered the project back on track. Her efforts led to tangible success, revitalized neighborhoods, satisfied stakeholders, and praise from community leaders. The transformation did not go unnoticed. Colleagues who had once dismissed her now sought her input, and senior management began to recognize her as an invaluable asset. But for Maria, success in the project was only part of the battle. She saw the systemic issues within the workplace that needed to change and decided to act. Using her growing influence, Maria proposed initiatives aimed at workplace equity. She advocated for an anonymous system for reporting bias, ensuring employees could voice concerns without fear of retaliation. She pushed for mandatory diversity and inclusion training to address unconscious prejudice and foster empathy among the staff. Perhaps most boldly, she called for transparent hiring practices, challenging the old boys club culture that had long dominated the department. Though her proposals faced resistance from some, Maria persisted, navigating office politics with grace and determination. Over time, her efforts began to shift the culture, opening doors for others who had faced similar challenges. Months later, Maria stood on a brightly lit stage at the department's annual awards ceremony. She was being honored for her exceptional contributions, not just to the project, but to the organization as a whole. As she gazed out at the audience, she saw a mix of faces, allies, former doubters, and young employees inspired by her journey. "This isn't just for me," Maria said, her voice steady and confident. "This is for every person who's ever been overlooked, doubted, or silenced. Together, we can build a workplace and a world where everyone belongs." The applause was thunderous as she stepped off the stage, her head held high. Maria wasn't just surviving anymore. She was fighting for justice, and she was winning.